Welcome to Peaceful Stories. Today, we're delving into one of the most disturbing and tragic tales of a serial killer whose name has become synonymous with evil, Luis Garavito. Known as La Bestia or the Beast, Garavito is one of the most notorious serial killers in history, responsible for the deaths of over 140 children in Colombia. This video will take you through the full story of Garavito, from his troubled childhood through his heinous crimes, to the eventual capture and the legacy of horror he left behind. This is a story not for the faint of heart, but one that needs to be told. Join us as we uncover the depths of this man's depravity and the lasting impact of his actions. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos was born on January 25, 1957, in Genova, Quindío, Colombia. From the beginning, his life was marred by abuse and neglect. The eldest of 7 children, Garavito grew up in a household filled with violence. His father was an abusive alcoholic who regularly beat him and his siblings, while his mother struggled with mental illness and was unable to protect her children from the brutality of their father. Garavito's childhood was a dark and painful one. He was subjected to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse by his father and other adults in his life. This early exposure to violence and trauma left deep psychological scars. As a young boy, Garavito was often bullied at school, and he began to exhibit signs of mental instability, including uncontrollable fits of anger and violent behavior towards animals. By his teenage years, Garavito had become a loner, struggling with feelings of rage and confusion. He dropped out of school and left home at a young age, drifting through various towns in Colombia. During this time, he developed a deep resentment towards society, which he believed had failed him. He started abusing alcohol heavily, further exacerbating his mental health issues. Garavito's early experiences of abuse, combined with his untreated mental health problems, laid the foundation for the monstrous acts he would later commit. His childhood was a crucible of suffering that twisted him into the predator he would become, a man with a deep-seated hatred for the world around him. By the late 1980s, Garavito had become a transient figure, moving from town to town, often working as a street vendor. It was during this time that he began targeting young boys, typically between the ages of 6 and 16, who were often poor and vulnerable. Garavito would lure his victims with promises of money, gifts, or work, exploiting their trust and desperation. Once he had gained their trust, Garavito would lead them to secluded areas, such as forests, fields, or abandoned buildings, where he would reveal his true intentions. He would bind his victims with ropes, gag them to muffle their screams, and subject them to hours of torture and sexual abuse. The pain and fear he inflicted upon these innocent children were unimaginable. After satisfying his sadistic urges, Garavito would strangle or stab his victims to death, leaving their bodies to be discovered by horrified locals. The brutality of his crimes was compounded by the fact that he often mutilated the bodies of his victims post-mortem, further demonstrating his complete lack of empathy or remorse. Over the years, Garavito perfected his methods, becoming increasingly bold in his attacks. He carefully planned each murder, often scouting locations in advance and selecting victims who would not be immediately missed. This allowed him to evade capture for years, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The victims of Luis Garavito, lives cut short. Garavito's victims were boys from poor, rural backgrounds. Many came from broken homes and had little to no parental supervision, making them easy targets for a predator like Garavito. Each of their stories is a tragedy, a young life full of potential that was cruelly snuffed out. Miguel Angel, age 9. Miguel was a shy, quiet boy who loved playing with his friends. One day, Garavito approached him, offering candy and a promise of work that could help his family. Trusting the stranger, Miguel followed him into the woods. There, Garavito bound and gagged him, subjecting him to hours of torture. Miguel's cries for help were silenced as Garavito ended his life by strangulation. The discovery of his body, bearing signs of brutal torture, shocked the community and sparked fear among the locals. Carlos Eduardo, age 11. Carlos was an introverted 11-year-old who loved reading and aspired to be a teacher. He lived with his single mother in a small town. Garavito encountered Carlos as he was walking home from school. Posing as a friendly stranger, Garavito offered to show him a shortcut. Once they reached an isolated location, Garavito revealed his true intentions. He assaulted and tortured Carlos, binding him with ropes. The young boy's suffering lasted for hours before Garavito ended his life. Carlos's body was found days later, leaving his mother devastated and the community in deep mourning. David Fernando, age 8. David, a bright and energetic 8-year-old, loved playing soccer. His family struggled to make ends meet, and David would sometimes work small jobs after school to help out. One afternoon, Garavito spotted David playing near a soccer field. He approached the boy with promises of a new soccer ball and money for his family. Enticed by the offer, David followed Garavito to a remote area. There, Garavito overpowered him, binding his hands and feet. He subjected David to hours of unspeakable torture before finally strangling him. David's small body was later found by locals, sparking outrage and fear in the community. 4.1 The beginning of the investigation. The disappearance of so many boys across various regions of Colombia had not gone unnoticed, but initially, the cases were treated as isolated incidents. The victims often came from impoverished backgrounds, and the assumption was that these were runaways or children lost to the streets. However, as more bodies were discovered with similar patterns of abuse and murder, authorities began to suspect a serial killer might be responsible. 4.2 Connecting the dots. In 1997, the police began to notice a disturbing pattern. Bodies of young boys were found along well-traveled routes, often showing signs of torture, sexual assault, and a similar method of killing, strangulation. These bodies were typically found in remote areas, sometimes weeks after the children had gone missing. The alarming similarities in these cases prompted the formation of a special task force to investigate the possible existence of a serial killer targeting children. 4.3 Breakthroughs in the case. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a mass grave in Pereira, a city in western Colombia. The remains of several young boys were found, all showing the same signs of torture and sexual abuse. The discovery made national headlines, bringing attention to the growing number of child murders. A series of witnesses came forward, describing encounters with a man matching Garavito's description, often seen in the company of the victims before their disappearances. 4.4 The capture of Garavito. Garavito's downfall began in October 1999 when he attempted to assault a young boy who managed to escape and alert local authorities. The police quickly responded and arrested Garavito. Upon his arrest, they found in his possession a detailed journal where he had meticulously documented his crimes, as well as a collection of items belonging to his victims, including photographs and identification cards. The evidence was overwhelming, and Garavito was linked to the murders through these items and forensic evidence found at the crime scenes. 5.1 The confession. Once in custody, Garavito initially denied any involvement in the murders. However, the overwhelming evidence against him led to a confession. Over the course of several interviews, he confessed to the murder of 140 boys, providing detailed accounts of each crime. His confessions were chillingly matter-of-fact, showing a lack of remorse or empathy for his victims. Garavito explained how he selected, lured, tortured, and murdered his victims, revealing his deep-seated need for power and control. 5.2 The trial. Garavito's trial became one of the most publicized in Colombian history. His confessions, combined with the evidence found, left no doubt about his guilt. He was charged with multiple counts of murder, rape, and sexual assault. The court proceedings were emotionally charged, with families of the victims demanding justice for their children. Psychologists testified about Garavito's mental state, describing him as a psychopathic predator with no capacity for empathy or remorse. 5.3 Sentencing and public outcry. In 2000, Luis Garavito was convicted of 138 murders and sentenced to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison. However, due to Colombian law, which restricts the maximum prison sentence to 40 years, Garavito's sentence was significantly reduced. His cooperation with the investigation led to further reductions, sparking outrage among the public. Many felt that justice had not been adequately served, considering the magnitude of his crimes. The possibility that Garavito could be released after serving only a fraction of his sentence caused widespread fear and anger. 5.4 Appeals and current status. Despite his heinous crimes, Garavito's sentence was reduced further for good behavior and cooperation. This reduction led to protests and calls for changes in the law to prevent similar cases from occurring. As of now, Garavito remains incarcerated, but the debate over his potential release continues to spark fear and outrage among the families of his victims and the general public. 6.1 Impact on Colombia. The story of Luis Garavito left a deep scar on the psyche of Colombia. His crimes exposed the vulnerabilities of the country's poor and the systemic failures in protecting its most vulnerable citizens, children. The case led to national debates on child protection laws, the penal system, and how to prevent such tragedies in the future. It highlighted the need for better social services, mental health support, and stricter penalties for crimes against children. 6.2 Legal and social reforms. In the wake of Garavito's crimes, Colombia implemented stricter laws against child abuse and murder. Efforts were made to improve the tracking and investigation of missing children. The case also led to discussions on reforming the justice system, particularly concerning sentencing laws and the treatment of serial offenders. Advocacy groups emerged, focusing on child welfare and the prevention of abuse. 6.3 Ongoing fear and the future. The possibility of Garavito's release remains a source of fear and controversy in Colombia. His name has become synonymous with evil, and the thought of him ever walking free is unimaginable to many. The legacy of his crimes serves as a constant reminder of the need for vigilance, compassion, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice for the most vulnerable members of society. The story of Luis Garavito is a harrowing tale of unimaginable cruelty. His actions not only claimed the lives of countless innocent children but also left lasting scars on their families and communities. Garavito's ability to inflict such pain and suffering is a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity. Yet, his story also serves as a call to action, to ensure that our children are protected, that justice is served, and that the darkness within some does not go unchecked. As we conclude this episode of Peaceful Stories, let us remember the victims of Luis Garavito not as mere numbers or cases, but as young lives full of potential and promise, cruelly stolen away. Their memories deserve to be honored, and their stories serve as a solemn reminder of the importance of vigilance and compassion. Thank you for joining us on this detailed and difficult journey through the life and crimes of Luis Garavito. If you found this video informative and wish to hear more stories about true crime, please subscribe to Peaceful Stories and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. Your thoughts and feedback are invaluable to us. Together, let's continue to raise awareness, seek justice, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.